Depp's vulnerability that evening in Madrid unveiled layers of pain he had long kept hidden beneath his public persona. He spoke in hushed tones, his voice steady but heavy, with the burden of revisiting wounds he had hoped were buried for good. Friends present described a shift in his demeanor. His eyes, usually animated with dry wit or artistic curiosity, seemed to darken as he recalled the turbulence of those years. He wasn't merely recounting past events, he was reliving them in fragments. Glimpses of arguments that spiraled out of control, of whispered apologies that were followed by more chaos, and of nights spent trying to make sense of a relationship that oscillated wildly between affection and anguish. Depp described the courtroom drama as one of the most surreal and dehumanizing experiences of his life, likening it to being dissected in public while powerless to stop it. He said there were moments when he would look out at the sea of flashing cameras and feel as though he were being watched not as a man fighting for his truth, but as a spectacle, a character in a narrative he could not control. The toll this took on his emotional well-being was profound. Depp confessed that he developed a sense of hypervigilance, an ever-present tension in his body and mind that refused to ease even in moments of stillness. He would wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, unable to shake the feeling that he was being judged, watched, or misunderstood. Therapy helped to a degree, he said, but there were elements of his trauma that no therapist could fully reach, memories too entangled with shame, confusion, and regret. He admitted he sometimes questioned not only what had happened, but who he had become in the process. This confession was not about blaming Heard for everything, but rather about the psychological complexity of surviving something so public, so personal, and so profoundly destabilizing. This raw admission, spoken quietly against the backdrop of the Spanish skyline, was the moment many around Depp began to understand the depth of his emotional scars. He wasn't simply a man haunted by the public's perception of his relationship. He was a man still grappling with the ghosts of it, the echoes of arguments, the weight of false accusations, and the constant barrage of negative press. Depp had learned to build a life around this trauma, but it was a fragile existence. His relationships with those closest to him, especially with his children, had become his primary source of solace. Yet even in these moments of quiet connection, the specter of the past lingered, a reminder of how deeply his personal life had been exposed and distorted for public consumption. Friends described Depp's struggle to reconcile the man he had been before meeting Heard with the person he had become after their tumultuous relationship ended. He had been a romantic, a dreamer, someone who believed in love and connection. But after years of emotional turmoil, betrayal, and intense media scrutiny, he had lost much of that idealism. The bright-eyed optimism that had once fueled his career, and personal life had dimmed, replaced by a guarded, more cynical version of himself. He spoke of how he no longer trusted easily, how even in the moments of intimacy he felt the walls he had erected around his heart. "I gave too much, and I lost too much," Depp said, his voice betraying the pain of realizing that the love he once sought so fervently had turned into something destructive. Depp's closest confidants reported that he had started to question his place in the world. As he recovered from the public and personal wreckage, he found it difficult to trust his own instincts. The self-doubt that had consumed him during the darkest moments of his marriage to Heard had resurfaced with a vengeance. He admitted that there were days when the weight of everything, his fractured identity, the fear of judgment, the pain of broken relationships, felt almost unbearable. Yet there was also a palpable resilience in him, a determination not to let the trauma define him entirely. Despite the haunting memories, Depp had found solace in creative outlets, particularly in his art and music. But even these endeavors were complicated by the constant reminder of his own vulnerability. Each brushstroke on a canvas, each chord played on his guitar, was an attempt to wrestle with the internal chaos, to make sense of the damage that had been done. Depp's duality, his ability to appear both fully engaged and distant, became increasingly apparent to those around him during his time in Spain. While his professional demeanor remained intact, friends and colleagues couldn't ignore the subtle signs of the emotional toll he was carrying. His interactions, though polite and gracious, sometimes carried an air of detachment, a sense that he was physically present, but mentally and emotionally tethered to another time and place. This constant inner struggle was not easily visible to the public eye, who saw only the surface, the actor navigating his comeback with professionalism and charm. Yet beneath that, there was an unspoken truth. Depp was still wrestling with the reverberations of his past. The complexity of his emotional state was compounded by the fact that his personal turmoil had been played out on the world stage for years. There's a certain kind of isolation that comes with that kind of exposure, an isolation that was evident when Depp spoke of his experience in Spain. He admitted that, while he had found solace in his art and music, there were still moments when he would feel completely disconnected from the world around him. In those moments, the public's perception of him as an untouchable star, someone who should have it all together, felt like a heavy mask he could not remove. As much as he yearned for peace, it seemed that the world refused to let him have. Depp's emotional complexity became even more evident when he spoke of his relationship with his children. His bond with them had been a source of strength throughout the years, a refuge from the chaos and the drama. However, even that connection was tinged with the consequences of his past. He revealed that, while he tried to shield his children from the turmoil of his marriage to Heard, the repercussions of that period still had lingering effects on them as well. The media storm that had surrounded the divorce, the court cases, and the relentless tabloid coverage had, at times, been impossible to escape, and Depp expressed guilt over the ways in which his children had been impacted by it all. His desire to protect them from the shadows of his past was palpable, but he couldn't erase what had happened, no matter how hard he tried. As much as Depp tried to move forward, it was clear that the trauma he had experienced would never fully dissipate. For every step he took toward healing, there were 2 steps back, moments where the weight of the past would settle over him like a fog, clouding his thoughts and emotions. The process of healing, as he openly admitted, was not linear. Some days were better than others, but on days when the memories felt especially raw, it was as if he were reliving the entire ordeal all over again. Yet through it all, Depp has continued to forge a path forward, using his art, his family, and his own resilience as anchors in an ever-shifting sea of emotional turmoil. In the years following the public unraveling of his marriage and the subsequent legal battles, Johnny Depp has undergone a remarkable transformation. He has shifted his focus toward building a more peaceful, centered life, one where authenticity and emotional well-being take precedence over fame and external validation. His openness about mental health is a significant part of this shift, and it's clear that Depp is no longer hiding from the emotional complexities of his past. Instead, he has come to view his struggles as an integral part of who he is, not a source of shame, but a source of strength. By embracing the reality of his trauma and speaking about it openly, he is reframing the narrative around his life. What was once a painful, isolating experience has become a stepping stone to self-awareness and growth. Surrounding himself with a close-knit group of people who truly care about him has been an essential element of his healing process. Depp is no longer concerned with the opinions of those who may have once been part of the toxic aspects of his life. He has distanced himself from relationships that drained him emotionally, choosing instead to invest his time and energy into connections that nourish his spirit. These are the people who have witnessed his journey, offering their support without judgment, and in turn Depp has learned to trust again, something he once believed was lost forever. This newfound sense of autonomy has allowed him to take control of his narrative in ways that go beyond the legal victories or the media frenzy. Depp's candid confession in Spain marks a pivotal turning point in a journey that has been deeply transformative, not just in his personal life, but also in the way he publicly confronts his experiences. For years, Depp had been seen as a figure whose life was a roller coaster of highs and lows, often masked by the roles he played and the celebrity he became. People expected him to move on, put the past behind him, and continue with his career, as though nothing had ever happened. But Depp's revelation shows that he is choosing a different path, one that centers on healing, authenticity, and embracing the complexity of his emotions. He no longer sees his past as something to hide or repress, but as a part of his story that deserves acknowledgement and understanding. In choosing to speak openly about the emotional toll of his marriage and subsequent battles with Amber Heard, Depp is engaging in a form of radical honesty that challenges the expectations of a world that often wants to see only the glamorous or the successful side of a person. Trauma, as Depp has now acknowledged, does not simply fade with time or distance. It lingers, subtly reshaping the way a person interacts with the world. Trauma requires active work and attention. It demands an ongoing process of self-reflection, acceptance, and healing. For Depp, this process began years ago, but it wasn't until his time in Spain that he was finally able to vocalize just how much of an emotional toll his experiences had taken on him. The notion of simply moving on had long been ingrained in his mind, as it is for many people in his position who are expected to keep pushing forward, regardless of personal pain. However, in confronting the scars left by Amber Heard, Depp has not only found a way to reclaim his personal narrative, but he has also found the strength to redefine himself in the context of his trauma. By facing the past, Depp has demonstrated that he is no longer a prisoner to it. Instead, he is making the decision to shape his own story, telling it on his own terms. This act of vulnerability has had far-reaching implications, sparking a larger conversation about the often overlooked impact of emotional abuse. In the wake of his defamation trial, much of the media's focus had been on the legal aspects of the case, the back-and-forth battles, the courtroom drama, and the salacious details that many consumed with fascination. But Depp's reflection on the personal emotional damage he endured through this experience shifts the conversation away from the public spectacle and into a deeper, more meaningful discussion. It highlights the ways in which emotional and psychological abuse can be just as damaging, if not more so, than physical harm. The scars left by abuse are not always visible, and yet they can shape a person's emotional landscape for years. Depp's words have illuminated the long-term effects of living through such an experience, and by sharing his truth, he has offered a voice to those who have been silently suffering in similar circumstances. In a world where vulnerability is often met with judgment, Depp's willingness to openly confront his pain is both a courageous and empowering act. His confession challenges the notion that men, especially public figures, should remain stoic and silent when it comes to matters of mental health and emotional well-being. Depp's transparency opens a path for others to recognize their own struggles and to understand that it is okay to be affected by the events that have shaped them. Trauma doesn't disappear because the world moves on, and it is important for people to acknowledge that the healing process takes time. For Depp, healing has not been a linear path. It has been a journey full of setbacks, reflections, and moments of self-doubt. But through this process, he has learned that true recovery doesn't come from erasing the past. Rather, it comes from integrating it into the larger narrative of one's life. It means accepting the pain and learning how to live with it, using it as a foundation for growth and understanding. By speaking out, Depp is helping to create a space for others to do the same. His confession is not just about his personal healing. It is also about creating a dialogue that is often sidelined in the pursuit of fame and success. In doing so, he is showing that emotional scars, like physical ones, need time, care, and understanding to heal. These kinds of wounds don't have visible bandages or scars that can be easily dismissed, but they are just as real and impactful. In sharing his experience, Depp has become a voice for the silent suffering that many endure in the shadows. His vulnerability is a reminder that no one is immune to pain, and that healing, though difficult and often messy, is possible. Depp's reflection has also brought attention to the importance of compassion in the healing process. It is not enough to simply acknowledge the trauma. There must also be a commitment to treating oneself with the same level of care and kindness that one would extend to others. This is something that Depp has struggled with in the past, but through his time in Spain, he appears to have come to terms with the necessity of self-compassion. While he has often been seen as a figure who deflects attention and avoids confrontation, this moment in Spain marked a shift. He now understands that true healing comes not from suppressing pain or pushing it aside, but from embracing it and allowing oneself the space to grieve, reflect, and heal. The larger societal impact of Depp's confession cannot be overstated. By speaking out, he is helping to shift the narrative around trauma and emotional abuse, creating an environment where it is okay to be vulnerable, to ask for help, and to process the experiences that have shaped us. In the long run, this openness will not only aid Depp in his healing, but will also create a ripple effect for those who look to him as an example of strength. His story will serve as a reminder that it is not the events themselves that define us, but how we choose to respond to them. Johnny Depp has chosen to respond with honesty, grace, and a commitment to healing, and in doing so, he has created a space where others can also begin to confront their own pain and start their own healing. Journeys. Johnny Depp's time in Spain has marked a defining moment in his ongoing journey of self-discovery and healing. The man who arrived on the Iberian Peninsula was not the same individual who departed after reflecting on the emotional scars left by his turbulent relationship with Amber Heard. Although his past still casts a long shadow, Depp has emerged from this challenging period with a deeper understanding of himself and a renewed sense of purpose. His transformation is a testament to his resilience, the quiet strength that has allowed him to navigate some of the darkest chapters of his personal life and emerge with a sense of clarity and self-assurance. When Depp first confronted the emotional trauma of his past in Spain, it was as if he was peeling back layers that had long been hidden beneath the surface. For years he had carried these burdens in silence, trying to maintain the public persona of a carefree, larger-than-life star. Yet deep down, the weight of his experiences was something he could no longer ignore. The mere knowledge that Amber Heard was in Spain triggered memories he had spent years suppressing, reopening old wounds he had hoped would fade with time. Yet through this confrontation, Depp came to understand that healing is not about forgetting the past. It is about acknowledging it, integrating it into one's life, and ultimately finding a way to move forward. The moment in Spain forced Depp to face the ghosts of his past, but it also allowed him to experience something transformative. Clarity. It became clear to him that he could not escape the emotional remnants of his past, but he no longer had to be bound by them. His art, a form of expression that has always been central to his life, became a vehicle for processing his emotions and finding peace. Depp's creative outlets, whether through painting, writing, or music, became an important means of making sense of his pain, allowing him to externalize feelings that were difficult to articulate. Through these acts of creation, Depp found a semblance of healing that allowed him to move from being a victim of his past to someone who could take ownership of his narrative. He understood that the key to moving forward was not to suppress his emotions, but to embrace them, to channel his pain into something constructive. The evolution of Depp's self-awareness also affected his relationships. For years, he had been surrounded by an industry that demanded constant performance, where personal connections were often superficial and true support was hard to come by. But through his time in Spain, Depp began to refocus on the relationships that genuinely mattered, the ones that provided him with emotional support and stability. He has increasingly distanced himself from toxic, draining interactions and has instead sought out those who accept him for who he is, flaws and all. These relationships have become a vital part of his healing process, helping him redefine his sense of worth and reinforcing the importance of emotional well-being. Depp's shift towards prioritizing mental health has been crucial in his ongoing recovery. He has spoken more openly about the importance of addressing emotional struggles, not as a weakness but as a necessary aspect of personal growth. In a world where mental health is still often stigmatized, especially for men, Depp's willingness to engage in open conversations about his emotional state is groundbreaking. His recognition that healing is a lifelong process has been a turning point in how he approaches his emotional health. He no longer views himself through the lens of the tough guy image that Hollywood often cultivates. Instead, he sees vulnerability as a form of strength. This newfound perspective has not only reshaped how he interacts with the world, but also how he interacts with himself. He no longer seeks to bury his pain or deny its existence, but rather to confront it, accept it, and use it as a catalyst for change. Despite the internal turmoil that Depp has faced, he has remained committed to his professional obligations and his art. His return to the screen, the launch of new projects, and his continued involvement in creative pursuits all signal his resilience and desire to continue contributing to the world in meaningful ways. However, what sets him apart now is that his creative pursuits are no longer just a means of escape. They are a way for him to reclaim his voice, to assert his identity in a world that often sought to define him through sensationalized headlines and public controversies. Depp's work has always been a reflection of his inner world, and it is through this art that he has been able to confront his past head-on, channeling his personal experiences into a medium that allows him to process them in a healthy and productive way. While Depp's career trajectory is once again on the rise, it is clear that his journey of healing is ongoing. The emotional scars from his past will never fully disappear. They are a permanent part of his story. But Depp has learned to accept this reality, and in doing so, has found peace. The ability to move forward, despite the emotional baggage that comes with it, is what makes his journey so compelling. He has not allowed his past to define him. Rather, he has taken control of his own narrative, choosing to define himself by his resilience, his creativity, and his commitment to healing. The shadow of Amber Heard will always be a part of Depp's story, but it no longer has the power to define him. Their tumultuous relationship, while painful in public, is no longer something that controls his life. Depp has moved past the anger, the bitterness, and the pain, choosing instead to focus on the positive aspects of his life, the relationships that nurture him, the creative projects that inspire him, and the inner peace he has worked so hard to cultivate. While the memories of their time together may continue to surface from time to time, Depp now has the emotional tools to cope with them, to process them, and to let them go when necessary. What Depp has ultimately demonstrated through his journey is that true resilience does not come from forgetting the past, but from learning how to live with it. It is about accepting the wounds, the pain, and the lessons they carry, and using them as stepping stones toward personal growth and self-empowerment. His journey is a reminder that healing is not a destination, but a continuous process, a journey that requires patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to confront difficult emotions. As Depp continues to navigate the future, it is clear that he will not allow the mistakes or failures of his past to determine the course of his life. Instead, he is embracing his flaws and imperfections, understanding that they are integral parts of who he is. And in doing so, he is allowing himself the freedom to evolve, to grow, and to create new chapters of his life, filled with authenticity and self-awareness. Johnny Depp's story is one of transformation, of a man who, after enduring immense pain, found a way to rise above it and use it as a source of strength. His story is a testament to the power of resilience, the healing, power of art, and the transformative nature of vulnerability.